Hello, everybody. I was not expecting to have a second video out today, but I just watched a news show on the European Parliament where the European Parliament is putting out what they call a law for all the countries in the EU called the Disinformation Shield. And what the Disinformation Shield is, it's about taking away people's freedom of speech and freedom of press. They only want you to watch the government press and not be able to speak your mind, etc., etc., etc. And the UK left over a series, not of this bill, but over other bills in the past that basically forced them to take illegal immigrants and all this stuff. And this is kind of a continuation to where the EU Parliament is going to force their will onto all of the EU countries. Because of them forcing a bunch of stuff, that's why the United Kingdom left, was because they're like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't why we had the EU. It was supposed to originally only be about economics. This originally was the European Economic Union. Well, it's went a lot further than that now. That's why the British left. But all these European countries, including the United Kingdom, a constitution as we know it in the United States and a Bill of Rights as we know it in the United States, none of those socialistic countries over there have any of those rights. Don't exist as we know them. They have those rights, but they're limited, and you don't have a right in most European countries to do what I'm doing right now. I'm exercising both freedom of speech and freedom of the press, right? And so you heard some of our political leaders like J.D. Vance and President Trump talk about the United Kingdom and these EU countries, essentially limiting those rights, saying that isn't right. But some don't have constitutions, some do, but it's not spelled out that you have freedom of speech in those countries, because you don't. You also don't have freedom of the press. Most of them are kind of like Canada, where they have the government press, where they want you to know the information that the government media is putting out. Kind of like the CBC in Canada, and the BBC in Britain. That's where the problems come in. And now the EU wants to absolutely take that away. And I think that America needs to know, you want to know how come so many people are hyper brainwashed in Canada? Well, these kind of things and what the government did with the media, like in Canada and those European countries, you're seeing they're employing the exact same tactics that, Adolf Hitler did in the lead up to World War II. They didn't have free press, free speech either. And look at the brainwashing that happened due to that fact. And now in Europe, they've already got some of that disinformation shield up. They're going to make it more strict. And none of those countries actually ceded most of their power to the EU. In their countries, they don't have those rights. I think the average Americans and people around the world need to understand what's going on. Actually, that I'm aware of, the closest country that actually has a constitution similar to ours and a Bill of Rights in that constitution is the Philippines. Freedom of press and freedom of speech are actually guaranteed in the Bill of Rights of the Philippine Constitution, just like ours is. But other than that, I'm not so sure that those rights, as we know them in the United States, are actually guaranteed anywhere else. Something to think about, because it's certainly not true in Japan or Korea, not in Europe anywhere. And I kind of doubt anywhere in Africa has those kind of bill of rights. If I'm wrong, please somebody let me know. But I actually only know of 2 countries that have a constitution that actually spells out that all people have freedom of religion and freedom of speech. I just wanted to make you all aware, because they're voting on the new disinformation bill at the EU in Brussels. All right, take care. Bye-bye.